You're at a funeral. You're wearing black. Someone is speaking softly at the front of the room. This feels normal to you. It feels human. But the real answer to why you're doing any of this is far stranger than you think. Death rituals feel timeless, like they've always existed exactly this way. They haven't. What you do when someone dies is the end product of a very long, very strange experiment that started hundreds of thousands of years ago. And the experiment wasn't really about death at all. It was about you, the living. Go back further than you think is possible. Not thousands of years, hundreds of thousands. Somewhere in the caves and valleys of what is now Europe and the Middle East, early humans started doing something no other species on Earth had ever done before. They started burying their dead on purpose, not hiding them, not abandoning them, burying them. Researchers studying the Shanidar Cave site in Iraq found something that changed how scientists understood Neanderthals entirely. Bodies placed deliberately in the earth, some surrounded by pollen residue, suggesting flowers may have been laid with the dead. For decades, this was treated as proof that even Neanderthals grieved, that they understood loss the way you do. But here's the strange part. Burial wasn't really invented for the dead person, it was invented for everyone still breathing. Think about it. A corpse doesn't care if it's buried. It doesn't care if it's mourned, sung over, or remembered. The dead have no stake in any of this. So why did early humans spend enormous time and energy on bodies that could no longer benefit from any of it? Because the brain doing the burying needed something, not the body in the ground. Anthropologist Pat Shipman has argued that human survival depended heavily on cooperation in groups far larger and more complex than other primates managed. And cooperation requires trust. Trust requires a shared sense that the group matters more than any one individual. When someone died, suddenly the only thing left was the group's belief that this person mattered. Ritual was the technology that made that belief feel real. You weren't built to understand death. Nothing about evolution prepares a brain for true non-existence. Try to picture genuine nothingness for yourself. You can't do it. Your brain always sneaks in some version of you watching, even imagining oblivion from somewhere. So early humans didn't solve death. They worked around it. They built behaviors that let the group survive the disappearance of one of its own without falling apart. Burial. Marking the grave, returning to the site, repeating words. These weren't about the dead. They were instructions for the living, written into action because language alone couldn't carry the weight of what loss does to a group's stability. This is where it gets stranger. Psychologist Sheldon Solomon spent decades studying something called terror management theory, built on a simple but unsettling idea. Humans are the only species fully aware that they will die, and that awareness creates a low hum of dread running underneath almost everything you do. Solomon's research found that when people are reminded of death, even briefly, they cling harder to their cultural beliefs, their groups, their identities. Death reminders make humans defend their worldview like their life depends on it. Because, in a strange evolutionary sense, it does. Funerals, then, aren't really for processing the death of one person. They're a stress test for an entire group's belief system. Everyone gathers. Everyone watches the ritual performed correctly. Everyone leaves reassured that the system holds. That meaning didn't die with the body. You felt this without naming it. Have you ever noticed how a funeral can make you suddenly desperate to call an old friend? To repair a relationship you'd been avoiding? To feel certain about what actually matters? That isn't separate from the ritual. That's the ritual working exactly as old machinery designed it to. Now here's the twist that even archaeologists argued about for years. Some of the Shanidar Cave evidence suggesting flowers in Neanderthal graves was later challenged. Some researchers propose the pollen could have come from burrowing rodents dragging plant material underground long after burial, not from intentional placement. The flower burial, romantic as it sounds, might be an accident of small mammals rather than an act of ancient grief. Does that change anything? Not as much as you'd expect. Because even without flowers, the bodies were still placed with intention, positioned, covered. That alone tells you something. Rituals were already doing real work long before anyone fully understood why. Humans don't need certainty about an afterlife to build elaborate rituals around death. They need the ritual to function, certainty or not. Anthropologist Bruce Knopf documented funerary traditions across small-scale societies and found wild variation in beliefs about what happens after death, yet strikingly similar patterns in funeral behavior itself. Singing, gathering, marking time. Different stories, same architecture underneath. That architecture is what your brain inherited. You don't consciously choose to feel a chill at a moment of silence. You don't choose to feel a strange comfort in a familiar hymn or a structured order of events at a memorial. That comfort is ancient code firing correctly. Predictability in the face of an unpredictable, irreversible event. Your nervous system trusts patterns. Death is the ultimate pattern break. Ritual patches the break. Consider something even stranger. Why do almost all cultures, separated by oceans and thousands of years with no contact, independently develop something resembling a wake or vigil? A period where the body stays present, where people sit near it, speak near it, sometimes speak to it. Researchers studying grief across cultures have repeatedly found that proximity to the body, rather than avoidance of it, tends to ease the transition for survivors. Avoidance prolongs confusion. Presence allows the brain to slowly update its model of reality. Your mind needs to see the absence to believe it. Funerals are, in part, a forced confrontation your ancestors discovered was less damaging than denial. So when you sit in a quiet room with black clothing and soft music, you're not performing some arbitrary modern custom. You're running a program that started in caves. A program built by groups who learned, through trial and unbearable error, that ignoring death tore communities apart faster than facing it together ever did. Here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. You think your grief is personal, private, yours alone. But the shape of it, the urge to gather, to speak, to mark a date every year, to visit a place, all of that was handed to you by people who never met you, who lived and died long before recorded history, who were simply trying to keep their small group from collapsing after losing one more person to a brutal and uncertain world. They didn't know they were inventing psychology. They were just trying to survive one more season, and it worked well enough that you're still doing it. So the next time you're at a funeral, wearing black, listening to someone speak softly at the front of the room, remember this. You're not just mourning a person. You're participating in the oldest piece of technology your species ever built. Not a tool, not a weapon. A way to keep the living from falling apart when the dead can no longer hold them together.